Welcome to Skweeel, episode 4, documenting my research. I'm once again at SAE Byron Bay's beautiful SSL 9000K studio, which they're letting me use for the project, and I can never thank them enough. Today what I'd like to test is what the monitor path can do, and then perhaps some more complex combinations of the channel path feeding the monitor path and then feeding back into the channel path, and we'll see what that can do. A word of caution again, if you want to try any of this at home on your console, feedback loops are very unpredictable and can get very loud, so make sure you keep the monitoring levels down, protect your hearing at all times. Let's get cracking. Now, due to the nature of a monitor path, which is designed to be quite straightforward, short path between your tracks and your ears while you're recording so you can monitor what's going on, I suspect that the electronics are also quite simple, and therefore I don't think we're going to get a much different sound than what we were getting when we were using the line input of the channel to create the Larsen effect by that feedback loop. Let's check if I'm right. Now, keeping it simple, the monitor path, that's the inputs to it, can be fed either from the multi-track outputs or from the group outputs. And the beauty is you don't even need a patch cord. There's a button that does that on the console itself. Now, all I need to do is make sure that the monitor path's outputs happen to be feeding the group output of the same number, and there we go. We'll have our feedback loop happening. So this here is my monitor path. If I press group, the group output becomes the source of that monitor path. I'm going to bring its output fader close to unity, and so we can actually hear the Larsen effect. I'm assigning the small fader, in other words, the monitor path, to the main mix. And all the way up here in the routing section, we make sure that the small fader, the output of the monitor path, is feeding group output 27, meaning all the way down here. If we apply a little bit of positive gain with our small fader, the output of the monitor path feeds the group output, which itself feeds the monitor path, and we have our Larsen effect. Now we're really in well-known territory, high-pitched squeal, close to unity gain, close to the tipping point, which goes into our familiar flatula when we're way beyond the tipping point. So as I suspected, really nothing new there. Now I'm wondering whether bringing the EQ into the monitor path will give us the same types of sounds, the throat-like effects, the low-frequency pulses that we had when we were experimenting with the EQ in the channel path. So let's bring the EQ into the monitor path. Let's activate the EQ and let's reach the tipping point. So we do get the throat-like sounds when using the mid-band, no surprise there. That's using the low mids. We do get the low frequency pulses using the low band. Nothing new here. But what I noticed while I was preparing for this shot is that I do get an additional sound, which I would have to perhaps check again with the channel instead of the monitor path. When I apply a lot of cut in the low mid band, I do get into feedback around the tipping point, passing through this very high frequency content, very high frequency squeal. I'm not making the final musical piece for dogs. I don't know if people will appreciate this kind of ultrasound, but I reckon it's an interesting transition into silence before the tipping point, hitting that very, very high frequency squeal, and then having it all of a sudden move into low frequencies. And I notice this also allows me, if I again bring up conjure the low frequency pulse, cutting the low mids gives me this very rich harmonic content on top of my low frequency pulse. So all of that is quite interesting. It is a bit different. We have similar sounds, but we do have that very high frequency squeal that is new. Whether it's usable or not, we'll see in a year from now. Let's see what the dynamic section in the monitor path will eventually do, if it's that much different than when it was used in the channel path. Ample feedback loop happening, and we get the same kind of sound, including what I called the frog call, and slightly different transient harmonic content, whether the attack is set to fast or slow. But nothing new in terms of timbres. I would have said this before, the holy grail of this research is to achieve pitch control. If I can control pitch, then instead of composing a piece made up of bleeps, noises, etc., I could actually compose a piece which is pitch-based with melody, counterpoint, harmony, chords, etc. And I thought that perhaps now that I've explored the channel on its own with all its permutations, the monitor path on its own with all its permutations, I thought perhaps by combining both, by extending the path, I'd be able to have two faders interacting, and maybe one providing a coarse setting for pitch, and then the second one providing a fine adjustment to that pitch. So I've rigged 3 modules the standard way, using just a single path, channel path feeding into itself. And I obtain the well-known timbres. I'm using 3 modules for consistency. We can see that the transition into the Larsen is nice and clean, so no faults apparently anywhere in these 3 modules. And same with these 3, which I've rigged, again, 3 for consistency, and I've rigged them so that the channel path feeds into the monitor path, which in turn feeds back into the channel path. So there's one right there, another one right there, and another one right here. So I'm hoping by doing so that I can extend the dynamic range where the tipping point happens, and thereby extending the control over precise pitch. So let's mute these 3 just in case, and let's try to get these 3 in tune. If I can already get them in tune, then I have achieved somewhat a control over pitch. So I'm going to choose this node. And already these two, which were more or less tuned, have drifted. There we go. The amount of movement I'm applying, I know that the automation cannot consistently position the faders or the VCAs that are hiding underneath with that amount of precision. But can I achieve more precision with an extended path and with two faders interacting with each other? Again, let's go for a particular note. Pick this one for a change. Let's see if we can tune that one. So quite a bit of beating there, but again, that's the amount of movement I'm applying is in the order of 1/10 of a millimeter. It's more the muscle that's moving than the actual finger, and already that left one's drifted. And even if I did manage to have the automation bring them to be in tune like that, the moment I would do this in my composition, everything is thrown out the window. It apparently takes a bit of time for the feedback loop to stabilize and therefore to reach its proper pitch. And even though now it's stabilized, it's nowhere close to the notes that I was getting before. So even though that could be interesting as an effect, I am not close to getting the degree of control over pitch that would be necessary to repeatedly hit specific notes, create melodies, create chords. So it might be possible, but not so far. I might need to test this a bit more, but so far it doesn't look like this idea of making the path more complex and having two faders will help in any way in achieving pitch control, better pitch control. This concludes episode 4. I hope you enjoyed it. Do leave your feedback on the Facebook page. I appreciate your feedback just as much as I appreciate that one. And also on the YouTube channel, you can leave comments there. Until next time, make some noise, but don't forget to protect your hearing. We've only got one pair of these. Cheers.